early on, I find when people get into this kind of work, they're very quick to kind of soothe everyone. You know, someone like I shared right at the start, I've got some fear, or whatever. They're like, it's okay, don't worry, it's going to be fine. It's like, I know. That's not why I'm sharing it. I know it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be fine. I'm just trying to connect with you and be authentic. And so I'm often present, you know, in these moments when we're talking about this stuff, to the fundamental innocence of the harm we cause. We genuinely usually do it because we're trying to make things better for people, but we don't realize like that's actually our own inability to be with something that we're now projecting onto them and then fixing on them. I'm amazed by that little guy, that ego, because he's just like, he's so smart. And he grows with me because he's a part of me, of course. And like, I try more and more to like relate to him with awe and reverence, and just be like, man, look at you doing your work, not for evil, just to hold me in the place that I'm now familiar. Because familiarity is safety, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it's just incredible how like sophisticated and nuanced and subtle it gets, you know, like even these sort of things where we're like ostensibly in a conversation with ourselves about like the greatest of good and how we can heal all the trauma. And it's like, oh shit, now that's got a hold of me, and that's the thing I've got to let go. And like, ay. And I think this stuff is just like a mountain with no top, you know, like we never reach the top. We just have to learn to love the climb if we want to be in this game long term, which is also totally optional.
The container is now open. Adam Quiney is a coach. He's a podcaster, and he's a really deep spiritual thinker and seeker. He came on the podcast, and what opened up in front of us was a wide-ranging conversation about life on the path as we all see it right now. Next week, he stays around to talk to us about sacred intimacy. But this week, Sai, Adam, and myself have a really incredible conversation. It was so much fun, and it was so insightful. Just editing this today, I was like getting caught watching pieces and like trying to like re-download that information in my brain and like, you know, learn it super well. And then also because of the content of the wisdom, also having to return to that place where I'm allowed to just absorb and let go whatever doesn't stick around. It's that kind of stuff. It's the good. In the spirit of such like a free-flowing conversation, hit the comments below with any insights that have really cracked you open recently on your own spiritual path. We're all seekers, and we can all help each other learn. Now on to this awesome interview with Adam Quiney. Let's just let her rip. And
yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I have the same sense. Weird.
Cool. Adam Quiney, welcome to the container.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So we've been talking a little bit already, and so I want to offer the listeners kind of a way to step into the conversation we've been having by hearing a little bit about you and like how your sort of spirit forward work finds its way in the world right now.
Man, that's such a good question. Well, I guess the most honest answer right now for me would be like difficultly is how it finds its way into the world. So like I'll answer from over here, like me trying to put it in, and then I'll try to speak to like how I find it connects with people, and then just interrupt me if you're like, you're going on, dude, you're talking too much. But so like my mother-in-law passed away about 3 months ago, and we also had a really good year last year. And even though I'm very conservative about setting aside a lot of money for taxes because I hate surprises, we got a big giant surprise. And so you know, it's been a bunch of things all at once for me of like energy to hold. And also like it's resulted in the year feeling kind of lean. And this year feeling kind of lean. And what I'm finding is, spiritually speaking, it's hard to listen to the voice of spirit, which I often find is talking with a whisper when my fear is up, when scarcity is in the space, when, when all of that stuff is there. And so on this side of the fence, it's looking a lot like just a lot of self-soothing, a lot of uh, reaching out for support, and a lot of like connection, just connecting with like-minded individuals. And then how I find it landing in the world is like a whole myriad of ways. The number one thing I find is, and we were talking about this before we started recording, is that we really have to meet people where they're at. And so sometimes, people want to make a surface level change, and they hope their hope is that's going to transform everything in their life. I had this job and I hated my boss, and I've left my job and everything's going to be different. And like, I've been in this work long enough, and you guys probably have too, to know like everywhere we go, there we are. And it's not really your boss. You're going to find a new version of that boss to recreate the sort of thing. But it doesn't matter, because in terms of the path they're on, they have to have the experience of that not making a difference in order to gain the wisdom to know that's actually not going to make the difference. And it doesn't matter what I say to them. Anything I try to say is just going to get in the way of them learning that lesson. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of like, especially given what I just shared at the first part of this answer, there's a lot of me like, okay, I'd really love this person to see something deeper, because then they might hire me, or, whatever it happens to be. And instead, what there is to do is to just trust them on their path and like honor them where they are and offer them whatever support they'd like and that would actually serve them. So how's that for an answer?
Hell yeah. Stuck the landing there. Something that first comes up to me, that last part, because like for me, my main like coaching and support is for myself. I'm like, and it's amazing how many times I get the lesson when I am not ready for it, and then I eat shit, and then I get the lesson again, and it's like, are you gonna learn it this time? And there's the teacher can be very unforgiving if you don't just listen. And I have found it on my path very hard to learn things not the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here. I think most of us, like I said at the start, spirit speaks through the whisper, and then she starts to speak louder, and then she starts to like talk quite firmly, and then she starts to yell at us, like gives us a disease or something because we're not honoring our body, for example, or whatever it happens to be. Like, hey, what does it take for you to start to take stock?
Yeah, so then that offering of, instead of trying to offer people like, hey, I have the answer, it's like, I've got support, because the answer is going to have this, there is a process for you to actually get to the answer, but you can have support and help along the way. I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm finding myself like I'm finding myself in this really weird experience of not yeah, I'm like I'm almost lost in thought right now. What struck me the most about what you shared just now, Adam, was the way that fear can when fear is up, that like that voice is down, or like it's harder to hear the voice.
Yeah.
And that just resonated with me so strongly. And I'm not like lost in thought about myself. I'm just in this like weird space of like, I'm like floating in this amazement of feeling really deeply connected to like what you just shared, and just yeah, I don't know what else to say right now. Yeah, I appreciate what you shared.
You guys are cool. I love that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really experiencing these waves from you. And you have this blue clothing on. It feels there's something very oceanic going on right now
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I'm almost like, oh no, I should say something really interesting for the podcast, but I'm like, no, I'm like having an experience right now. It's like an emotional washing through, like feels very like oceanic was a really good word. Yeah.
Uh, that it's interest that connects to something, Adam, that you even mentioned about like this desire when you work with clients or are talking to potential clients of like, I want to offer something really smart or clever, or but then it's like actually, so you know, in a sense, support or just like in this situation, presence
Yeah.
is that's actually the gift to give rather than have some expectation. That's fascinating.
Yeah, just to like be with
Mm.
Yeah.
instead of do something with it.
Yeah, and it's like that is such a um it's like a martial art almost. Like of being with and then and just being so with that you're following the energy, you're following the like cycle of the you know of the flow of the energy and the information that is being exchanged and like dropping things in at the right time. It's like it's such a practice,
Mm.
like such a practice interacting. It,
This is one of the things I find like so, not to wrest the conversation in this direction, but like lacking in leadership, because everyone in a leadership role wants to prove their leadership or wants to be helpful or whatever. And what most of us can't see is like, that's how we step we step on people's process instead of just being with whatever's showing up, being in awe, being sad, being confused, being frustrated, all of that stuff we step over because we don't like to be that way ourselves.
Mm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. So much of that like domineering behavior in leadership is over caring.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way that sweetness can be so controlling and
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
Are you enjoying this conversation? Luckily, there's a lot of easy ways to support the work that we do, making circling, authentic relating, and spirit forward media available in perpetuity. If you're watching this on YouTube, a really easy way you can help us is hit like and subscribe and leave a comment below. If you're listening to this as a podcast, rate and review in whatever app you use. Those things really help us. But the best way you can help the show is become a patron on patreon.com/thecontainer. We are so grateful for our patrons who support the work we do and support the considerable costs that the show generates. As a way to give back to them, we are launching an incredible series called The Way That Can Be Told. In it, Sai and I go chapter by chapter through the Tao Te Ching, circling ourselves as we take in the wisdom, and then connecting the lessons of Lao Tzu to circling. It's already been a really fruitful adventure to record this stuff, and that is going to start releasing for patrons only here in the next week. Once in a while, we will be making some of those episodes for free as part of our mission to make this kind of content available to everyone. But only patrons will get to see the vast majority of this awesome series. We really appreciate any support you can give the container. And now back to our interview with Adam Quiney.
Yeah.
We're so oblivious to the harm. I put harm in like, I don't know, 6-point font or like italics or something, but like the harm we cause to someone's process through these sort of like there's no place for your ego here, or like embarrassment is not allowed. And it's like, yo, embarrassment is a aspect of the abundance of life. And so if we want to live a life that's fully expressed and experienced and abundant, we have to have room for embarrassment. And it's okay that someone feels embarrassed. And early on, I find when people get into this kind of work, they're very quick to kind of soothe everyone. You know, someone, like I shared right at the start, I've got some fear or whatever. They'd be like, it's okay, don't worry, it's going to be fine. It's like, I know. That's not why I'm sharing it. I know it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be fine. I'm just trying to connect with you and be authentic. And so I'm often present, in these moments when we're talking about this stuff, to the fundamental innocence of the harm we cause. We
Yeah.
genuinely usually do it because we're trying to make things better for people, but we don't realize like that's actually our own inability to be with something that we're now projecting onto them and then fixing on them.
That was so well said. I'm just kind of like wanting to look out the window for just give me 15 minutes or a half hour.
Yeah, and it's something I've noticed recently is that as I've built capacity with um not rushing in, or like with allowing and welcoming like whatever's coming up. And I do this with my children too. Like they're like kind of the perfect ones to practice with, like the boo boo of like, let yourself feel it. Like just let yourself feel the pain. Like don't,
Yeah.
because I see them fighting against it. Like I'm gonna fight against this pain, and then that creates more pain.
Yeah.
And it's like just let yourself feel it. Um, but as I've built capacity, there's like this, I don't know what the word for it is. The word that's coming up is vanity, but I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe it's pride or something. Or like where I become less tolerant of people who haven't built that capacity.
Mm.
Right.
It's so funny because then that's like another example of not welcome. That's like an example of the opposite of not welcome.
Yeah. It's like
Um,
yesterday's breakthrough becomes today's crutch or something like
yes.
that. Yeah.
That is so funny.
I've been noticing that the last couple days where um I'm having this argument in my head with someone who I love very dearly, but we had a phone call and it didn't turn into an argument, but we had a disagreement about like how spirituality, can it transform any trauma into magic?
Mm.
And I would say like yes. That like there are practices that can transform anything into actual real magic. And uh which I'm very confident is like that's the right answer and I'm so
Right.
wise. And in my mind I keep returning to that and like having this argument, and I, it's so hard on a really lived level to just let that go and say um both views are like trapped in duality, and like they're both probably just identity expressions, and ultimately like just let that go, and what is here right now for me rather than this fucking argument, this like a little simulation I keep running. And what you said, so I really like connected that. For me it's like there's so much work to be done. It's easy to think like, oh, I found these really important spiritual insights, and I have,
Yeah.
compared to the younger me. It's like I've grown so much, but like you said, those breakthroughs become this new ego identity that is now the source of like, oh, conflict. And you know
I'm amazed by that little guy, that ego, because he's just like, he's so smart. and
mm,
and he grows with me because he's a part of me, of course. And like I try more and more to like relate to him with awe and reverence, and just be like, man, look at you doing your work, not for evil, just to hold me in the place that I'm now familiar, because familiarity is safety, and blah 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 blah. And it's just incredible how like sophisticated and nuanced and subtle it gets, like even these sort of things where we're like, ostensibly in a conversation with ourselves about like the greatest of good and how we can heal all the trauma. And it's like, ah, shit. Now that's got a hold of me, and that's the thing I've got to let go. And like, ay, ay, ay. And I think this stuff is just like a mountain with no top, you know, like we never reach the top. We just have to learn to love the climb if we want to be in this game long term, which is also totally optional.
Mm.
When ooh, how long do you feel like you've been in this game?
Probably about 15. Well, I mean, I'm 45, I think, but I've probably been like, you know, we start when we're really young, or I did, reading like personal development books and stuff. But I think I actually got into this work like properly about 15 years ago,
Wow.
where I
Yeah.
started to like embrace the vulnerability of um, having a teacher or having a coach, as opposed to like, you know, there's a safety when I'm just reading my own book because I don't have to be exposed to anyone else pointing out anything or like seeing a part of me that's maybe not something that I'm able to bring love to yet, or, you know, any of that sort of stuff.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that process like, getting a teacher and yeah.
It involved meeting a lot of my own arrogance.
Mm.
So the way it unfolded was initially I was in law school. I was going to be a lawyer, and figured pretty early on into that process that was not going to be. I could do that career very well, but I wasn't going to love it, and it felt kind of well, how do I describe this? Like maybe dangerous, you know, like, ooh, that's like sort of like a drug you really like doing. It was like, ooh, that's going to be like a bit addictive and probably not healthy. And
Mhm.
so I was looking for other careers. I met a coach. He described what he did, and I thought it sounded awesome. And he said, well, you've got to, if you want to do this work, you got to get trained and you got to work with a coach. You can't sell what you're not willing to buy. And so I said, okay. And what I did was I hired him, but remained invulnerable and impenetrable. So
Mm.
now I was like engaging with the sort of the doing of having a teacher, but not actually being taught, not actually being open to anything that they had. And so, like, an example would be I'd bring stuff to work on that would be like, help me be less stressed out about my exams. I didn't need any support whatsoever with that because I was going to be fine one way or the other. And I didn't really have skin in the game with that, versus like, help me create intimacy in a, excuse me, help me create intimacy in a relationship where all of the intimacy is drained out. That would have been like much edgier for me to bring. Hell no, I wasn't going to bring that. And I was kind of in this rock and a hard place where I'd hired him, I'd taken his training, and it none of it felt very impactful. And the work I was doing with clients felt very surface level, and like I was annoyed that I was having to do it. And I felt kind of resentful. And I was worried because the end of law school was coming and I was going to have to go back to law if I didn't figure something out. And so I took like one final kick at the can, and I found my way into a program where they were really exquisitely skilled at seeing how someone was being, regardless of what they were doing. And they started to reflect this to me. They were like, Adam, your package looks great, but you're invulnerable. You're impenetrable. There's zero impact we can have on you. And if that's the game you're playing, there's no impact you're going to be able to have on the world either.
Mm.
And so that moment, you know, I can trace it back to the day when that conversation occurred. And
Mm.
like, for the first time in I think 30 years at that point, I cried for like 4 hours afterwards, not out of sadness or anything, but just I was opened for the first time. I felt like my heart was open. I was like, oh dear Lord, this is how y'all are feeling. We can feel this way. This is crazy. Y'all should get on this. So that was the starting point for it.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Something I noticed about that is in your own um coaching materials, you mentioned like serving the quote smartest person in the room.
Mm,
And hearing your story, I just I see the or like I feel like I'm glimpsing the origin of that. Like there's some kind of um yeah, serving the younger you in a way.
Mm.
And
yes.
as a fellow law school dropout. First of all, respect. Because there's two conversations with your family that you'll never forget. The joy they have that you are going into law school,
Yes.
and the other experiences that they share when you you tell them you are no longer pursuing law. But yeah, so like I feel like I really understand that character from the inside, and that yeah, my experience of seeing myself that way is very it's like one of the biggest limitations I've ever experienced.
Hmm.
Um and for me it was circling that finally got me to like, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. Yeah, or to like some degree, whatever my particular version of that is.
How did that come about? Like,
Mm.
was someone just sharing in a relational moment with you, or like, how did that kind of catalyze?
Um, yeah, I started circling because now my good friend, but at the time he was just organizing stuff in Charlottesville, and he put the moon phases image on the event, and I was like, oh, this will be some like magical thing. I was like getting into the occult, and I was like, oh, this will be cool. Um, yeah, and then it was totally this like secular process of circling and authentic relating. And it's like my first few months of that was trying to be the best at circling and
Uh-huh.
authentic relating. That was how I was gonna like be the best at it, you know?
Yes.
Um and then yeah, it like it didn't happen all at once for me, but it took time, and slowly seeing people be super vulnerable, and then realizing like, oh, I am a child.
Mm.
Like I am a child at this, and like seeing people really admit things that I would not be able to, that resonated with me, but I would not be able to own, including uh like contributions by like Psy and other people that we practice with, just continuous. And to this day, I keep rediscovering myself not being super vulnerable, like
Yeah.
rediscovering walls and rediscovering like um my focus drifting onto other things in these ways that become really protective really quickly of that ongoing process of um allowing the real me to be okay and to be seen.
Hmm. Yeah. People are always, you know, I find like everyone gets sort of a perennial request or feedback in terms of like what I want more of from your being. And for me, people are always like, I want more of your heart. I want more of your vulnerability. And I'm always like, me fucking too. If you have a secret trick. And of course, I'm really committed to that practice, but it's also that is kind of my dharma. I'm a man with a huge heart who learned to build big walls to keep that heart safe. And I'm always just, oh, I've protected that heart again, and I got to pull those down. And yeah, it's a again that mountain with no top.
Mm. What do people want more of me?
Commitment.
I was gonna say that.
He didn't even hesitate.
Well, it's funny, Adam. I have had the experience multiple times in our practice community of people making that exact request of me, of like, I want more vulnerability. And then I've had the experience of those explicit, we sometimes even have a practice of making those kinds of explicit requests. And
Mine is
it's,
always commitment.
yeah.
It's like I have this way. I'm learning that, and I've been told, I was told years ago, actually, in the break method. I took this class a couple years ago. It was like a course. Um, and one of the things that was revealed about my personality was that I have this way of like energetically sort of like getting people addicted to my connection early on, and then I sort of just move on.
Uh-huh.
And then they're just like, but wait, like we had this thing and it was like this, and I don't realize that I'm doing it, or it's not like it's not an intentional thing that I do, but
Yeah, not
that is what
conscious.
keeps being revealed to me, is like that there's this unevenness with the way that I commit to connection with other people. Like I get them in, and then I'm like, okay, there's something really shiny and cool over here. I'm gonna go over here now. Oh, that hurts to even admit.
Mm.
It's like the shadow of half-heartedness.
Mm.
Um, ugh,
Can I share a version of that, like a moment where I got hit with one of those?
yes.
It was so in my lineage of work, or one of the lineages I practice, we talk about people, we have an essence, like these fundamental qualities, and then we have our survival mechanism, which is like these patterned ways of being we learn to like put into the world to stay safe. And the patterned way of being is often the opposite. So people who are the like bring commitment into the world can show up quite flaky, ironically. So I'm
Ah,
a guy who like connection's part of who I am, but I learned growing up like, if I connect as deeply as I am, people get turned off. They find I'm too much. Maybe they hurt me. Maybe, whatever. They pull away. And so I learned to like preemptively pull away. And so people had given me this name for part of my survival mechanism called heartless asshole. Just like, yay. And I'd been working on it, and me and like a bunch of the people I was working with at the time, we'd all gone out for drinks afterwards at the end of the weekend. We were all exhausted. When the work works you, you're like, oof, I am wrung out. And we were just hanging out. And this woman was sitting across from me and telling me this story about like something emotional that had happened. And then I saw one of my friends get up, and I was like, oh, are you going to the bathroom? I'll go with you. And then I got up and went to him, and I came back down. They're like, oh, wow, we've never seen heartless asshole as like clear as that moment. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And I didn't realize like how, um, like under the level of my consciousness, this stuff was right. There's nothing
yes.
conscious about it. But what was happening was I'd learned this story is getting too deep. We're getting too connected. Jettison, pull the eject
Gotta
seat.
go.
That's right. Yeah. And like get out of it. And then it was totally justified because I did have to go to the bathroom and my friend was going to the bath. It's just fascinating when you see this stuff. You're kind of like,
Oh,
damn, like there's like guilt and shame. And there's also sort of like delight almost a little bit like, oh, wow, I caught something new. Cool.
yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
I really love
Mm.
the trip logic thing that you bring up, where it's like it, the persistent the the persistent trait, like say half-heartedness comes from actually deep commitment.
Yes.
And so there's this way that as it keeps routinely coming up, it's like that's just part of your path, is to continuously return to trying to get to true essence.
Yes.
And it's like the only thing in the way of your true essence is your own creation of your like identity. It's like so it's like that tension that you subconsciously are recreating over and over again brings you back to like the battle that Arjuna is told by Krishna to like engage in and break through, like break through ego identity. Here it is again. Now and here it is again. Now here it is again. So there's this way that like all of these features conspire towards your own enlightenment. Like so spooky how the machine works to
Yes.
just like continuously help you as much as universally possible to
Universe. I like
if
that.
you
Mhm.
Human.
I knew exactly what you meant. I was 100% there. The other thing I find so cool about like how this plays out is that, so we were talking like, the thing that we do is actually usually like the polar opposite of who we truly are, or it's kind of like who we truly are turned all the way up to 38 instead of 10. But the thing I find so interesting is what we do to other humans is we see them doing that thing we don't want them to do, being flaky or whatever. And then we relate to them as that, and we try to correct that behavior rather than seeing them as their essence and being like, oh, who this is someone who is commitment, or who is connection, but got scared. And then like meeting them there. Instead, we meet them on the surface. And then, of course, it just recreates more of the problem. And ay.
I'm going to listen to this episode like multiple times.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the episode.
Yeah. That's funny because I like rarely have that, I do. I mean, I do get excited about episodes, but like this is just a really good conversation, and one that I need. I like really need it to be having it right now.
It's a really good review for the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, when you meet the assholes in life. I just want to like nail this point down again, and really I just want to paraphrase it for my own neural network.
I love
hopefully the listeners benefit, but yeah, that like you meet the asshole, and what you are meeting is the thing this person needed to feel safe at some point.
Yes, well said.
Yeah, and it's like, and I can sympathize with that. Like, I might not like the way you have learned to feel safe, and it might be really, really dark even, but I know what it's like to feel unsafe, and I know what it's like to pursue safety in a mindless sort of like automatic way. And usually I am more automatic and more mindless the less safe I feel. So it's like I don't know. There's a lot we can find sympathy with, even what seems like the most corrupt or the most evil even individuals.
Yeah.
That sort of brings me full circle back to the experience at the ritual the other day, and like having this like newfound level of compassion for what had that person like saying no embarrassment, there's no embarrassment allowed here or whatever, just like
That's such a beautiful thing you just said. That's such a beautiful movement.
Thank you. Yeah.
I love I honor the depth of the practice I can feel in both of you just as a starting point. That's present for me in this moment. Second, let me step past that as quick as possible. Let's move past my acknowledgement of you. I really love the way you describe that. You're meeting what they needed to feel safe. And ultimately, the thing you're describing to me is like the path to find empathy. And empathy is available for everyone. We can have empathy for everyone. The thing in the way of that is that because we can't see the path by which they got there, we can't see the path by which we could also get there. And then if we can't see how we could get there, we can't we can sympathize, intellectually, but we can't actually empathize because I would never get there. And then you can't have empathy from that space. So it's like, man, that's like, rules for living in relationship with people 101. You just laid out.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that makes me think of the the way that people often conflate sympathy with empathy.
Yes.
Something that this is really bringing up that's been alive for me lately is that the presidential campaign here in the US, it's like the first one since I really, as a to feed a spiritual need, I've really tried to separate myself from political commitments, and trying to really see how much of that world is just illusion, and yeah, and really changing my relationship to it after having like many years of being highly committed as an
Mm,
organizer and as different things. And um there was a recent debate, and I don't know what was in me. I listened to a podcast about it, and I was experiencing I was like, at a certain point, I was just making object of how it was making me feel,
mhm.
and how um there were like feelings of validation coming up. It was sort of this like giddiness I was feeling. But then I noticed it's not a very sweet giddiness. It's like yeah, it's like very, there's like a nastiness about it. And by nastiness I mean there was like reveling in other people being wrong and me being right. And there was just like, it was just like, it was like jacking off to duality itself. It was just like, yes, create division. And like, there was something very like pornographic about that,
Ooh.
like political, like dimension of it. It just like creating this separation.
Hmm.
And and when I really think about it, people whose politics I like have a hard time understanding. It's like it's not that complicated. It's like they are worried about the well-being of the world, and they see things a certain way and probably see things I don't.
Yeah.
Um and it's like, it's just so it's like it takes a lot of ginning up and returning to these activities that get us in that kind of heightened giddy state of polarization. And it's almost like this form of worship we go to
Mm.
get those divisions set up. And the divisions are like, it's so, I think it's actually not that hard to find a way to empathize with people who have radically different political views. I say that now, I and I, not like I'm very good at it, and that I used to be very bad at it, so who's to say. But
You have a great way with words. I love it. Yeah, it's neat. Like part of the spiritual gate, or the gate, one of the gates we have to pass through on the spiritual journey, is where we reach a level of spirituality, and then we look back at people that don't have that level of spirituality, and feel like Schadenfreude, or whatever it happened, like, see, I've overcome, and now we're doing the same thing they're doing, but just from like a, I don't know, transcendent place or something. It's just like, oh shit, I'm I'm still there. Holy
mhm.
mackerel. And my take on this is that it's always easier to close our heart, because there's more safety in that. If I close my heart, I don't get wounded. And if I don't get wounded, that's going to be safer. So the polarization is like the easier path. And it requires more input of energy into the system, so to speak, to open our heart. But opening our heart is always simpler, because then that's I think, part of the essence of the magic of circling, right? It's very simple. Here's what I feel in this moment. Here's what's happening as you look into my eyes, all of that stuff. And long term, it requires so much less energy, because we don't have to hold up all of this framework of like us dancing between each other and pretending that we're not going to talk about this thing. So it's like short
Yes.
term, we got to put in more. Long term, it pays dividends. And that's not always easy to get people on board with.
No, it is not. It's not easy to get me on board with that for a very large chunk
for
of my life.
for
Gosh.
until I get over it, until I figure it out,
Oh,
it
no.
continues to be
No, I mean the short term versus long term. I remember a therapist telling me that once, like that I was much more interested in short term pleasure versus like long term. And I remember just being like, yeah, obviously. Like, I mean, it's like who isn't? How what do you mean? I couldn't even concept, like this was, I was in my 20s, like I couldn't I couldn't conceptualize like what it would be like to flip that. And now I get it. Now I get
Dude,
it.
the short term rules though.
Yes.
Whew.
Big fan.
Whew.
Huge fan.
Whoa, that actually makes me think. Like, I wonder if this would be a good time to start talking about the sacred intimacy thing. Just thinking about, yeah.
I've like a burning share about short term, long term.
Yeah, I want it.
A burning frame around this.
You have to do it right now.
I have to do it right now. I need the short term benefit. Those things that like with vulnerability where it feels so scary going in, but then the long term is like, yeah, it's like feels more dangerous, but then the long term is like way more energy, way more freedom, way more connection. I've noticed this thing, and what I feel like we're about to talk with intimacy will be similar. It's like there are these doorways, and when you approach them, it feels like it's going to fucking suck on the other side. And you're doing it purely because like you're supposed to or something. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to drink every single day.
Right.
Like I'm told that's true. And you approach it and you're like, this is going to fucking blow. And then as soon as you open the door, it was entirely fear. There is actually no downside. It's the fear leading up to making the decision to let go of something. And then once you let go, you immediately get all of the resources of you were clenching onto it. And now you have free hands and all this energy. And I noticed this. I had this moment when I went to my first 12-step meeting. There was this moment when I didn't know I was going to say this. I would just went because Sai invited me to one, and I wasn't intending to stop drinking. But when it came to me, instead of just saying my name, I said, I'm Jonathan and I'm an alcoholic. And then the world became possible. I went from I don't know. I mean, do I really need to quit drinking and stuff too? All of a sudden, it was like, I don't have to control this anymore. I don't have to try this anymore. It was like going up to the doorway if it seemed impossible. But then as soon as I let that in, it was like, oh, it can be over. I don't know.
And it really was over.
It was over.
It's crazy. That's like,
hopefully forever, but yeah.
Because then you can be with it. Like once you're present to it without there's like this is alright if I tag like one sort of plant medicine story onto this. So one of the things I do sometimes is support people through integration classes around ayahuasca work. And usually the structure in which I work is 4 days of ceremony. And then I'm teaching classes that the sort of in between those 4 days. And the first night for people that have worked with ayahuasca usually is very disappointing because the medicine's taking time. And usually what's happening is like they're going through life and let's say that this person that we're going to make up called Reggie has this perennial constant experience of like, I'm not getting it and I'm frustrated. And so they come and they drink the medicine. And what the medicine does is she brings them exactly that experience, because that's how you heal something, is you be with it. And the next day we're in class and I'm asking them like, so how was the night? And like, a bunch of people are like, amazing. And then some people are like, yeah, not that good. And I'll ask them like, how do you feel about that? And their answer will be, yeah, it's fine. I'm just telling myself that like, it's okay. And this is part of my process, which is funny because they're not describing how they feel at all. They're describing how they think about how they feel.
Right.
And this is the thing that stops us, is like, we can't leave a place until we've been there. And they're working so hard not to be there, right? They're working so hard not to just own, I'm fucking frustrated and this sucks. And I'm disappointed and I feel bad. And the mind is trying to protect them from meeting that bottom, right? And then once we do, hey, I'm Adam and I'm an alcoholic. Hey, I'm Adam and I'm addicted to weed. Hey, I'm Reggie and I'm fucking pissed about this. Then we're free in that moment. It's crazy.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
what a cool what an amazing thing that you get to do, that integration process. Like,
It's the best.
yeah, because yeah, I'm just imagining that there's just so many like wider path applications.
Yeah.
It's like these little, because we create like a container 4 times a year for psilocybin. Like, and
Beautiful.
we don't have like a teacher with us. Like, we do it on our own, but we really put a lot of thought into it, and a lot of like intention and ceremony, um and then do integration work around it. But um just knowing on that level, like what that experience is like, to imagine having a person teaching the class to help integrate. Oh, it's also,
Yeah, it's so helpful for people because it's a lot. It's a lot to sift through, and our ego wants to grab a hold of it.
The container is now closed. We had so much fun talking to Adam, and luckily next week we bring him on again to teach us about sacred intimacy. If you're interested in Adam's podcast, The Transformational Leader, or you would like to get coaching sessions from him, go to adamquiney.com. And if you'd like more of his thinking about all things life, you can check him out on Facebook and LinkedIn. We have a nice way of closing. Keep it nasty.